I always say my greatest talent as a sprinter was figuring out really early that I had no talent. But I was really interested in the things that the other people had that I didn't and how to develop those. And I was enough interested in that because my father was a coach. I'd always sort of grown up in a coaching environment. I knew enough that the people that were coaching me said, I'm not sure about that. That's wrong. I'm going to start coaching myself.
Welcome to Slay, the podcast where we dive into all aspects of female health, fitness, and life. I'm your host, Louise Hazel, and in today's episode, we have an incredibly special guest joining us, an individual who's been at the forefront of speed and sprint coaching for years, working with some of the world's fastest athletes. He has over 25 years of experience in coaching elite sprinters and speed athletes, and has coached over 70 Olympians, spanning across 10 Olympic Games, amassing over 30 Olympic medals. His expertise in speed development and biomechanics is unmatched, and his holistic approach to training considers not only the physical aspects of performance, but also the mental and psychological factors that play a crucial role. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the art and science of training for speed and diving into the specifics of what it takes to help an athlete get faster. We'll also explore the unique nuances involved in coaching female athletes, including how to tailor their training programs to the specific needs and considerations. So whether you're an athlete looking to improve your speed, a coach eager to learn from one of the best in the business, or someone simply fascinated by the world of speed or elite performance, this episode is packed with insights that you won't want to miss. Please welcome Stuart McMillan to the show. Stu, how did that feel?
Louise, you're pretty good at this.
I knew you'd say that.
Yeah, like you are.
I knew you'd say that.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah. How did I
That was
just
an
know?
excellent introduction.
But how did that feel? I always ask people this. How did it feel like hearing some of those accolades back as you sit there
I
and
think
think
the
about your
first
career?
time I heard them,
Yeah.
it was
Made
pretty,
you feel uncomfortable.
yeah,
didn't it?
really uncomfortable,
Why
right?
is that?
I don't know. I think we're all kind of a little bit put off by people saying nice things about us. You know, it just, that doesn't sound
But you
great.
are the pinnacle of elite
shut up.
performance, Stu.
Shut up.
The absolute pinnacle.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you've done that. The athletes are. But you happen to be extremely freaking good at what you do.
I'm super athletic.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
Which we'll talk about. We'll
Yeah,
come
yeah,
to talk about
yeah.
later. But the first question that I wanted to ask you was why speed? Why sprint training? Because just sitting here, you don't look particularly fast. I love it. Talk to me about your entry into sprint coaching, where it came
I
from.
think my entry into coaching is very familiar for most coaches. Mm-hmm. I'm a failed athlete.
I love it.
Like I was pretty good, but not good enough. You know what I mean? I was a soccer player growing up. I played professional soccer for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. I made $75 in those 2 years that I played, quote unquote, professionally.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I said, this isn't going to work. Mm-hmm. I can't make a career out of making $75 every 2 years.
Smart.
I was really interested in the speed aspect of it because I was a fast soccer player.
Right.
So my friends said, hey, you should just come out and sprint. Try sprinting. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of friends who were sprinters. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. So I said, forget soccer. This isn't working for me financially.
Yeah.
Maybe I can make a living as a sprinter.
Go on.
You
How
know,
did that
a
work?
tall, skinny white guy. Yeah. Yeah, that didn't work either.
Really?
So, yeah. And so I always say my greatest talent as a sprinter was figuring out really early that I had no talent.
Right.
But I was really interested in the things that the other people had that I didn't and how to develop those. And I was enough interested in that because my father was a coach. I'd always sort of grown up in a coaching environment.
Oh, this makes
I
sense.
knew enough that the people that were coaching me, I said, I'm not sure about that. That's wrong. I'm going to start coaching myself because I'm slow because of you. It's your fault. So I started coaching myself within 3 months of me sprinting, and I didn't get any faster. But I was able to.
You're going to be like,
Oh no!
my personal best.
No, if anything, I got slower. But if I was able to convince a few of my friends to train with me,
what
they
happened?
did get faster.
Well, that's a result.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you're just crap at coaching yourself, but other people.
Correct.
You had talent.
Correct. I was good enough to be on the university team, so I went and I remember this like it was yesterday. I went to this this very well-known indoor meet in Canada. Ran, not great.
Tell us how fast.
Not great.
Come on.
Not really
You
good.
remember. It's not like you've
I do.
forgotten. Come
So
on,
it's
then.
I'm running a 300 meters at the Knights of Columbus Games in 1994. There's 1,500 people watching, which is a lot of people for an indoor meet in the middle of Canada, in the middle of nowhere, right? In February, where it's minus a million outside.
We barely get that at the
Yeah,
Nationals.
and 80 meters, I'm out. Like I'm leading at 80 meters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then what happened?
Yeah, well, that's the end of the story.
Well, there's another like 220 meters to go.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Okay, cool.
So I died at 80, and I've got 220 meters to go, and I came off the final bend of the second lap because 300 meters indoors is at a lap and a half, and everybody else had already finished the race.
Wow.
And I've got 80 meters to run by myself.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Did you get one of those?
I got the pity clap. The pity clap was the end of my sprint career. And I remember being on the bus on the way home, and the head coach coming up to me and saying, listen, I think you need to make a decision here, whether you want to be a coach or an athlete. And if I were you, and he walked back to his seat.
Excellent.
And that was it.
Cliff.
I never put spikes on again.
So that was the start.
That was the start
of your coaching career.
Yeah.
Can you remember the first athlete that you coached to success? Not that you coached, the first person that you coached and you were like, oh shit, we just did something really special.
Yeah, probably the first was the first medalist that I coached. Jimmy Shea. He was an American skeleton athlete. I started coaching him in 2001.
Skeleton as in bobsleigh?
Well, no, skeleton as in skeleton.
Skeleton what?
Skeleton is head first on your belly on a little tea tray.
The average person
Bobsleigh
doesn't necessarily know
is...
what... Okay.
Well, that's why I'm explaining it.
All right.
Skeleton is head first on a tea tray, down the same track that you do bobsled in.
Yeah.
And bobsleigh is a bigger sled that you sit in.
Yeah.
Right? There's 2 people or there's 4 people. Or there's monobob, which is 1 person.
Do you know I've done skeleton bobsleigh?
No, you haven't. You've done skeleton or bobsleigh. You haven't done both. Yeah, skeleton.
This is our relationship.
Yeah, it's not fun. I've done it too, and it's just really not fun. It's not a good idea.
Talk to me about your dude.
Oh yeah, Jimmy Shea. So Jimmy Shea was an American guy. He was one of the big stars going into the games. He was a 3rd generation Olympian.
Wow.
He was the favorite to win, and big snowy day in Park City, and he won. So that was great. That was pretty cool. And that was the first time that I was, that was pretty cool. But also, what's next? Like almost immediately. Like I watched this as, yeah, good job, Jimmy. Gave him a little clap, shook his hand. Don't think I gave him a hug. And then I'm waiting to, what's next? What's next?
Age-old question.
And right. And I think most people who are really good at what they do, that's kind of what's next. It's just, all right, we've done that now. What's next?
So then, obviously, skeleton and track and field, 2 completely different sports, but a lot of crossover. How did you transition away from perhaps coaching skeleton, or were you training people that were on track and then, as they typically do? Then
I started coaching track in the early 90s, or when I stopped, right? So 93, 94, somewhere around then. Trying to coach track and field as a professional coach in Canada at the time, impossible. There's no such thing as a professional coach in Canada. There was very few professional coaches in the world at that point.
Why is that?
Because it's just not you're competing against football, hockey, baseball, basketball in North America. It's really hard. It doesn't make a lot of money. There's not a lot of finances in it. So it's just those jobs just weren't available outside of the US and the NCAA system. And in Canada, it just wasn't. But what was available in Canada, especially where I was in Calgary, was access to working with all of these incredible athletes who are on other national teams. So speed skating, skeleton, alpine skiing, hockey, bobsled, all these other sports. So me as the quote-unquote speed power expert, I started working with a lot of the athletes in the other sports, especially the sports where speed was a lot more important. So skeleton, because the first 30, 40 meters, you're standing up and sprinting as fast as you can before you jump on.
Yep.
And bobsled. First 30 or 40 meters, pushing the bobsled as fast as you can before you jump on. So I became essentially a bobsled and skeleton coach for the next 15 years before I actually started making money as a track coach.
So your experience, because I want to talk about the fundamentals of sprinting, your experience of acceleration must be unparalleled because of that, because of coming from that kind of base. But what are the fundamental principles of sprinting, regardless of age or gender, do you think that every athlete should try and stick to? And where do they go wrong?
Okay, so simply, sprinting is the amount of force that you can apply, how fast you apply it, the direction in which you apply it, and how heavy you are.
Got you.
And that's it.
Okay, so
there's only 4 things.
Okay, what was number 1?
Force. How much force do you apply?
So that is dependent on what? For the average person at home that's listening that might be like, a weekend warrior, what does that mean to them?
It means to them how strong they are, essentially.
Okay.
It's your force producing, it's called force producing capacity. Like, what is your capacity to actually produce high forces? And then the second one, in a short time. So from that, when most people think about that is, okay, that's kind of power, you know what I mean? Really, really strong, but also really, really fast.
Yeah.
Power.
Yes.
It's not exactly accurate, but that's kind of what we mean by it. How much force can you apply? How fast can you apply it? And so that's most of it.
If I'm the weekend warrior and I'm like, okay, so force production, what can I be doing on a daily basis or a training plan that will help increase my force production? What types of
You lift heavy things often.
Perfect.
If it's about force.
And force only.
And force only.
Yep.
You have to lift heavy things.
Yep.
So if you're trying to be faster at anything, doesn't matter what it is, you need to, stronger at anything, more forceful at anything, you need to pick up heavy things a lot.
Love it. What was principle number 2, Stu? Remind me.
Speed, how fast you move that force. So principle number 1, how much force do you apply?
Yep. Principle
number 2, how fast that you apply it.
Got you. So what are the factors that are affecting speed application?
What are the factors?
Well, like if I'm Joe Schmo at home, how can I improve my speed?
Well, I mean, there's a continuum, right? So it's not just one or the other. So there's a continuum of heavy things. And you probably, if you pick the heaviest thing that you pick up, you're not going to move it very fast. Right. So it's not very specific necessarily to sprinting. And the lighter the thing is, the faster you can move it. And then the more specific it becomes. But one is kind of contingent upon the other. It's still force related. So you pick up really heavy things, and you might be really slow at that, and that's fine. You pick up lighter things, so lighter barbells, whatever it is, and lighter medicine balls, and eventually you're actually sprinting. So on one end of the continuum, you might be doing a maximum weight deadlift, for example, for a 1RM or a 3RM. It's as heavy as you can possibly go. And on the other end of the continuum, you're running as fast as you possibly can. And everything that we do, and everything that you do when you're training clients, exists somewhere on that continuum. You're either doing it very, very heavy, a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter, or really, really fast. And everything in between.
Love it. Third principle, Stu.
The direction.
Now, this is a really interesting one, and I'll tell you why. Because when I was first introduced to sprint training, there was a huge kind of what direction? Let's just clarify. What direction do you want to be running in when sprinting?
Oh, forward.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So there was a real emphasis when I started, my sprint career. I didn't know whether I actually won the English schools 100 meters. Did you know that? So did you know that, Stu?
No, I don't think I did know that, actually.
So for those of you
Did
at
no
home,
one show up that day, or is like?
Well, yes, everybody
showed up.
Every school child in the country showed up.
Really?
And I came first.
Yeah.
I didn't
Were they
know
all
that
injured at the same time?
They were not injured.
They were not?
They were not injured.
Because you were not really well known for your speed.
I will not in my later career.
Yeah, but
I
earlier.
was a speed-based heptathlete.
Okay.
And obliterated everybody in the race.
Obliterated?
Obliterated.
Wow.
But on paper was like fourth fastest going in, but we'll talk about mindset later. Let's talk about speed. So when I was first coached, I was purely taught to drum my knees up and down, and my knee carriage was the most important thing. And so I remember, as a group of young women training, we would drill every single day, and it was up and down, up and down, up and down. And even though I practiced those drills, there was part of me that always knew that my speed was coming from my ability to push forward. And I feel like whilst those drills made me a little bit more coordinated, they didn't necessarily make me any faster. And I think the thing that I was doing probably better than my teammates at the time at Peterborough Athletics Club was applying the force and the speed in the direction at which I wanted to go. Whereas I kind of was like, why is everybody running in where they're losing energy and everything's going vertically as opposed to forward?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've kind of like broken that down for you, but just reiterate.
Well, there's quite a lot of complexity in that.
Absolutely.
There is.
And also nuance because everybody's biomechanics are completely different.
Sure.
So
when you're starting,
yeah.
so say you're just leaning forward and you're about to start sprinting. The only way to go forward is by pushing back. Once you've reached your maximum speed, the only way to continue running fast is by pushing down. If you push back, you're going to basically lose your center of pressure. You kind of get over-rotated and you lose your posture and your technique and so on. And then every step in between is an incremental change in the direction in which you apply force. So that's kind of complex. But basically, you can boil that down to the slower you're going, the more you're pushing back. And the faster you're going, the more you're pushing down. You're kind of just bouncing. Think about a ball. If you had a little tennis ball or Indian rubber ball or whatever, and you throwing it as far as you can, just watch what it does. It just skips, and eventually it just starts skipping a little more vertically. Or getting a rock and throwing it against some water. So there's, that it can become quite complex. But still, like you said, sprinting is still all about moving your body forward, down the track, down the field, down the road, whatever it is. You have to actually extend your hip. You have to get your knee behind your arse.
Nice.
Right?
Yep.
You have to. It's the only way to go forward. Your knee behind your butt. It has to be.
So we're talking like back end or back side mechanics.
You're extending your hip. So that has to happen to go forward. And that's where I think a lot of people really misunderstand these drills that you're talking about, these high knee drills.
Yes.
High knee drills are, well, I was going to say they're great. They're not. They're silly. There's no hip extension in that. All you're doing is flexing your knees. You just bring your knees up, and that's kind of important, but it's nowhere near as important as actually extending your hip, pushing your knee back behind your hip.
In your opinion, who's the best hip extender in the world?
Oh, it's Louise Hazel.
Shut up,
Absolutely.
Stu. He's talking shit. You're an idiot.
The best hip extender in the world is the fastest person in the world.
Which is?
By definition. So right now, the world champion in the 100 meters in the men is Noah Lyles.
Yeah.
And in the women was Julian Alfred.
Yeah.
They are, by definition,
At
the
this
best
moment in time.
hip extenders right now.
I love that. Principle number 4, Stu. So we've had force production.
The amount of
speed,
force,
direction.
how fast you apply the force, the direction, which is essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about direction, is your technique.
Yes.
And number 4 is your mass. How heavy are you?
I love this topic because in the gym, the interesting thing about, opening a female gym is weight is a conversation that comes up all the time, but it never comes up from a context of performance. And when I first opened the gym, 2019, I had a handful of clients. And so it was a really fun place. We got to play a lot. And one of the things that I introduced our clients to was like the ideal of like strength to weight ratio. And this, idea that if you weigh, if you're really, really light and you're lifting really heavy, then your strength to weight ratio is increased. And so it's a really good way to look at, as opposed to just the numbers, actually what is the percentage of my body weight that I'm lifting for the deadlift or the bench press or squats, and therefore how can I improve that percentage and view that as an increase in performance and look at that as a goal. I feel like this is something that's not talked about enough. So tell me what the benefits are, or, as it pertains to elite sprinting and speed, why body weight is so important.
All things being equal on the first 3 things, the amount of force you apply, how fast that you can apply it, the direction in which you apply it, the lighter person wins. Every time. That's just physics. You can't get away from that. However, and there's a little bit of complexity in this as well. Typically, the more muscle mass you have, the more force you can apply.
Yep.
So there's always this balance. It doesn't mean that necessarily we're trying to get you as skinny and light as possible. You still want to apply as much force as you can.
Of course.
So you need a certain amount of muscle mass to be able to do that. So as you know, in your career, it's always a little bit of a trial and error.
Yes.
Like, where do you feel your best? Like,
Absolutely.
where do you feel your fastest?
Yes.
Is it at 60 kilos? Is it at 65 kilos? Is it, is it somewhere in between? And it's always, from my objective or my role as a coach and the one as the athlete as well is, all right, buddy, how are you at 60? Let's try 62. Let's try 65. And let's see what that does to the speed. But for sure, 100% you're right. It's if you have the same force, you apply it at that same speed, at that direction, the lighter person is going to win every time.
Now, I don't know whether you know about this, but I think we talked about this over dinner once. In 2012, there were a number of female athletes in the UK that were called fat by our performance director at the time. Should we name him?
No.
Okay, we don't need to name him. People can Google, you know who it is.
Yeah. Did he say fat?
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah, sat me down and told me I was fat.
Didn't say chunky.
Didn't say chunky, didn't say
Would
fluffy.
chunky be better, by the way?
Yeah, didn't say...
Would chunky be better? Probably not.
No, and also didn't say you're looking stronger. Said I was looking fat.
Yeah.
And at my opening performance, 100-meter sprint race at the Loughborough International, I came out of those blocks, the first 30 meters, really strong, really powerfully.
Yeah.
Couldn't necessarily hold it for the rest of the race and didn't have a great season because my power to weight ratio was off. And so what we're talking about here for athletes, this is so, so important because it really comes down to timing and it makes you feel much, if you're carrying a few extra kilograms, it can make a humongous difference on your performance, like Stu just explained. But especially in the events where you're doing long jump or high jump, imagine carrying a couple of kilograms of sugar, 2 bags of sugar and trying to jump over the bar. And it was really interesting because, even then being a young athlete, in my mid-20s, the conversation never seemed to advance past aesthetics and never even entered the realm of performance in this particular case. So I wanted to talk to you about the nuances and how you approach as an elite coach, how different is it to train female athletes than it is male athletes? And what are the things that you've noticed that are particularly challenging or the differences?
Let's come back just a little bit.
To when he called me fat?
Yes, let's talk about that again. No, it all depends upon what your objective is, right? Your objective was to compete as well as you possibly could through these 7 events to maximize your total point total.
Absolutely.
To finish as high as you possibly could in that competition.
Absolutely.
Now, that doesn't mean for you that you're trying to be as light as you possibly could.
No.
Because you also had to throw a shot.
Absolutely.
And you had to do a couple of other things that were more reliant upon the force end of the continuum. Now, I've coached bobsledders. Bobsleigh is a gravity sport. You want to be as heavy as you possibly can.
You've got to live. And that, how much is a bobsleigh?
That's heavy.
Before as well.
Yeah, it's between 180 and 210 kilos. They're very heavy.
So it's a very different experience than just running in a straight line and pushing something.
But you still have to be really fast.
Yes.
So even then, there's a balance. But it's a gravity sport, so you want as much weight in the human as you possibly can, rather than in the sled.
Bobsleigh, right?
But you want that to be you, not to be, because the more weight that you put in the bobsled, the heavier that bobsled is. It's harder for you to push it.
Yeah.
So you want to be a little bit heavier. So it depends on the objective, right? And if say you're an Olympic weightlifter, or say you're a power lifter, it's all about force. How much force can you apply? So not everybody's objective is to run as fast as they possibly can, right? So what is it for you specifically? Because your objective was different as a heptathlete than it would have been if you just ran 100 meters.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So it all depends on what is your goal first and foremost.
Yeah.
Now to get to your question, that's a conversation that is extremely individualized, and I typically stay away from generalizations between sexes or races or whatever, or wherever people are from. However, there are some generalizable things, just because of from tradition. You can tell most men, hey, you're overweight. We need to lose some weight.
How do you approach that? Do you say the word fat? Do you say, okay, we need to build some...
No, typically
muscle?
I will never have conversations about weight. ever. I'll have conversations about training and nutrition,
Yes.
but I will never tie it to weight
Why is that?
unless it becomes problematic. And we've had the conversations around these other two things first. I'll have conversations about what we said 10 minutes ago about force, how fast you apply it, the direction, the technique, and mass. It's about mass-specific force. And if you, as let's say you're 60 kilos, and all those other three things are the same, and then Eric is 65 kilos, you beat him. Because you're lighter.
I beat you, Eric.
You would. I mean, I've seen Eric run. It's not pretty.
His direction, his
it's all off.
technique.
It's all of it.
Okay,
all
it's
of
all
it.
good.
No,
We don't need to talk
he's
about
trash.
that,
We
though.
don't need to spend any more time talking about Eric. But I typically will not talk about weight until I have to. And this is a challenging thing for me to do, specifically when it comes to talking to women.
Have you had to?
I've had to a few times.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How did you?
And
approach it?
but again, it's individual, right? It's not necessarily just because you're a woman. I coached a Jamaican sprinter for a number of years, and the Jamaican sprinter is used to a totally different way of being communicated with and to over the course of her career.
Yeah.
She wants me to tell her, you're fat. Honestly. Like, I have to be that direct.
Like, she wants, don't
No,
sugarcoat it.
tell
Tell me what
just
it is.
tell me exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Say, you know what, Louise, you're a little bit overweight. I think if we lost 2 pounds, you'd be faster. And these are the strategies that we're going to implement for you to lose these 2 pounds. And then she said, great. Now, I'm generalizing, but in my experience, many Jamaicans are that way. You trying to have that conversation with an American or a Brit, that goes very differently generally.
Yeah.
Right? Now, an individual is not the average of all individuals. So we're always speaking to individuals. So we have to go with it there first. But there is some differences, cultural differences that we also have to understand. So typically I will, as I said, we talk about performance, we talk about nutrition. If it becomes a problem, then we have to find a way to have a conversation about it.
If I look back at my own athletics career, my own track and field career, one of the things that I knew absolutely nothing about that I know way more about now is nutrition. How can we be better preparing our athletes? Do you feel like there's still lack of education? Because I literally sat down once with a nutritionist and we, talked about nutrition and what could I do to potentially, drop some body fat as opposed to, strength or whatever. And he just said, just stop eating crisps.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and that was it. That was
were you eating 10 bags of crisps a day?
Hell, of course I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was maybe like having a few a day.
Yeah.
So I was just like, and I had the discernment to know that I just don't feel like this is right. We never looked at my protein intake. We never did any testing. And I think that there's this perception that if you're an elite athlete, that you have everything at your disposal. And I know for a fact that the level of information that I was getting with regards to my nutrition was completely different to the athletes that were, let's say, we call on A category funding. At that point, I was a development athlete. So I'm not sure that people at home even know that there is a kind of staggered and phased approach to the support that you get in terms of like nutritional support, massage therapy, physiotherapy, psychological counseling. Basically, if you're one of the best athletes in the world, you have the best available to you. If you're not quite there, you get all of the crumbs. Would that be right?
I hate to break this to you, but we live in a meritocracy. So
Which
that's
means?
how it is, and that's how it should be.
Really?
Yes,
So
of course it should.
So my perspective is, shouldn't everybody, even the public, even Joe Public,
100%.
be able to access the best nutritional information, training information about speed? Surely that's what we're here, right?
How does that play out?
How does that play out?
Yeah, how does that work? You've got 1 million people that want to give you their advice on nutrition.
Well, for me,
As you don't know anything about nutrition.
yeah,
Let's pretend.
yeah.
And there's 1 million people trying to tell you 1 million different things. Who are you going to pay attention to?
Well, this is the internet, right? So we're talking
Correct.
about Instagram already. So I mean, it depends who you are, right? So I guess the message is there needs to be a level of discernment. This is the reason I guess we're sitting down as two experts and people that have been there and done that, right? You know, I would say to the general public that listen to experts and experts only. Listen to people who have 25 years or more experience in the field which they're talking about, as opposed to a person who is a fan of nutrition, is a fan of fitness. Let's sit down and listen to the people who have actually applied these things in order to produce something.
Yes.
And to produce the highest level performances, because ultimately it doesn't matter whether your ultimate performance is the Olympic Games or a 10K at the weekend. What you're trying to do is fundamentally the same, which is improve your performance.
So you went to see a nutritionist,
Yeah, told me to stop eating
a
crisps.
quote unquote expert. She went to school as a nutritionist.
That person was provided to me by our federation.
But she went to school to be a nutritionist.
Yes.
She was a
She was an
so-called
expert.
expert. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the best we could afford at the time.
It's challenging, right? I mean, you see, that's one of the hardest things that we have today. You know, it's like information is not a problem.
Yeah.
Discernment, curation is the problem. Who to listen to? What are the things that matter? What to pay attention to? Who to pay attention to? This is why, you know, I have so much respect for the things that you're doing. Like, you do that really, really well. And for me, like, you're asking me questions on nutrition. I'm just an old sprint coach. Right? Honestly, like, I know a little bit about nutrition. But I'm just an old sprint coach. Should you be listening to me about nutrition?
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily want to know what your, you know, nutritional plan is for your athletes. I want to know how, as a coach, you navigate those conversations,
Right.
because that's a different conversation to me. That's a, you know, more nuanced conversation. And therefore, how can we as fitness professionals be navigating those conversations with our clients? How does it happen at the top, where performance is key? Because I think my agenda really is to get women to understand, or, you know, to get women at home to understand that there's no difference between the elite athlete and the everyday
There really
performer.
isn't. There really isn't. And it's in a couple of different ways. Usain Bolt
Yes.
is the world record holder
Yes.
in the 100 and the 200 and the 4x1.
Yeah.
Greatest sprinter of all time.
Yeah.
It's 9 Olympic gold medals and 8 like crap.
Yes, he did. Yeah. Would literally, and for those of you that don't know, just a quick story here, because I love a bit of context. I remember going to an event where the only thing available, it was a Usain Bolt party, was McDonald's. And that's basically his fuel. That's what he was actually running on at some times. Go on.
He ran his fastest when he was 23 years old and then got slower and slower and slower until he eventually retired 9 years later.
So are you saying that perhaps with an improvement in certain areas?
Possibly, right? We don't know. We can't run the counter, but possibly.
Yeah.
It's also, let's look at Usain Bolt.
Yeah.
He's pretty lean.
Yeah.
Pretty shredded.
Yes.
And sometimes we look at that, oh, this person is really lean.
Yes.
So they must have really good nutrition.
Yes.
And or they must know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And
always.
we often conflate those two things.
Absolutely.
So to go back to your question, it's the conversations I have. We keep things really basic in all things, in everything that we do. And as you said very rightly, the things that we talk about who are, you know, Olympic champions are the same things that we speak to the 17-year-old kids that are just coming up, and should be the same things that you speak to as somebody who works with the general population. So for nutrition, we keep it really, really simple. Every time you eat, make sure you're having some protein.
Yes.
Every time.
Yes.
Every time you eat, make sure you're also having some vegetables and or some fruits.
Yeah.
Every time. If you've worked out pretty hard and you need a little bit more fuel, have some starch.
Yeah.
So potatoes or rice or what have you.
Yeah.
Like, and that's kind of it. Like, that's the basics. If you're doing those three things well, you're going to be doing okay.
Love that.
And the rest of it is just kind of filling in the gaps. And honestly, like, that's the conversation that I have with, and that works with 95% of the elite athletes that I've worked with over the course of the last 25 years.
I love it.
Protein every time.
Yep.
Fruit and veg every time.
Yep.
And if you worked really hard and you need some more fuel,
Yep.
get some starches.
I love it.
And that's it. And it don't stress too much if you know, I want a chocolate bar, I want a pizza on a Friday night, I want to get some ice cream or whatever. As long as you've done those three things,
Yep.
that's cool.
Exactly. Take care of those things first.
Right.
And the interesting thing to do is that's exactly the type of information that I, you know, promote to women that come in the gym. And also when I think back, I'm like, And the reason that is because I feel like, we as women have, with a lot of the time the primary caregiver, and we're the person that's in charge of the food on the plate or what's going in the cupboards. And so if I can get more general population women to understand how to eat for themselves, then they can be fueling the next generation of athletes and Olympians and children and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But you mentioned age, and I want to bring up this amazing stat that's been floating around. God knows where it came from, may or may not be accurate. Disclaimer. 95% of adults never sprint again after the age of 30, apparently. So if you're over 30 and you want to run fast, where would you have people start?
Oh, what a great question. Is that a real legit stat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would believe in that. I would think that it's probably even higher than that.
Yeah.
Depending on how you're defining a sprint.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually quite important to start off with. So if we back up a wee bit, there's a few different ways to move around the planet, right? We walk.
Yep.
Or we crawl first.
Yes.
And we walk.
Then we crawl again after the age of 18 and a few drinks.
Right. But we walk. And if we keep on going as fast as we can, we're walking as fast as we can, we have to do something different. Mm-hmm. So we have to transition into a different gait pattern. Mm-hmm. And we start to jog.
Yep.
And then most people, that's kind of where they stop, as you say, after the age of 25 or 30. I'll just walk and jog, walk and jog, walk and jog. But there's other things that we can do that are also really, really important. Because you can't jog if you want to go a little bit faster. You jog faster, jog faster, jog faster, jog faster. What do you have to do? Eventually you have to start running. And most people on the planet, I'm not sure about, most healthy people on the planet can also run. But they don't. They just jog. They walk and they jog. Walk and jog, walk and jog. But spend some time trying to run. But you also can't run super fast. At some point, you'll get up to a point where I can go faster. I need to do something different now. And that's where, quote unquote, sprinting comes in. Because running, you can run up to about 75% of your maximum speed, and that's it. To go any faster than that, you actually have to change what you do. You have to start bringing your knees up. You have to start extending back behind you a little bit better. You have to start going through a greater range of motion. And these are all really important things that we should be developing and continuing to develop as we age. In fact, they're probably more important for us to continue developing them as we age because we had them when we were younger. We took them for granted.
What do you think those benefits are for running fast for non-athletes?
Well, it's if we look into the future, what do we want our last 10 or 20 years to feel like and to look like? We want them to feel good and to look good, We want to continue being able to do all of the things that we were able to do when we were younger. Maybe we can't do it quite as well, but I'd still want to feel like I can sprint when I'm 85. It'll be a lot slower, but I want to still be able to do that. So I don't want to answer your question on a really general level, I don't want to be limited to just these things when I'm older. I want to continue being able to do all sorts of things. I want to be able to play. I want to play tennis. I want to play golf. I want to be able to jog, run, sprint. I want to do all these things. So why wouldn't you? Why would you want to have less choices available to you as you aged? And then secondary to that are all of the other benefits that come along with that. Increased mobility, increased sort of fascial communications through the entire system, increased ability to just produce force and to do all of these fun technical things in ways that, should really be interesting to us.
Can improving your speed improve your endurance, Stuart?
Yes, absolutely it does.
How so?
Well, it's just, so the faster you are, let's say that you, Louise, can move at 10 meters a second.
I'd bloody hope so.
Yeah, that's really fast. Well, you can't, but let's say you can. Every velocity slower than that, let's say you could go 10 meters a second.
Yep.
Let me say this a little bit simpler.
This is basically means you can run 100 meters in 10 seconds flat.
In 11 seconds flat.
11?
Yeah, because you have to accelerate.
Oh, yes, acceleration.
Right? So most of the top girls in the world run around 11 seconds.
Yeah.
And they have top end speeds of about 10.2 to 10.4 meters per second. Let's say that your top end speed is 10 meters a second, which is probably close to that when you're competing. I'm not sure how close it is now. And let's say Eric's is 8 meters a second.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Now, if you were just to do some endurance at 60% of your maximum speed, you're just jogging. You're going at 6 meters a second.
Yep.
60% of your maximum speed. If you're jogging with Eric at that same pace,
that's going to be his...
It's a lot faster than for him, isn't it?
It's going to be more like his 80%.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 80 whatever percent for Eric. That's a lot harder. So you can do go for way longer than Eric can because he's way slower.
Sorry, Eric.
Sorry, Eric.
Really shitting on him today, aren't we?
Well, he's not very fast, is he? Yeah. He's what we call in the business a has-been.
I mean, he did play basketball, though, Stu. Let's give him some credit. Can we give him a pity clap for that? Well done, Eric.
Well done, Eric.
He's a dope basketball player, I have to reiterate.
Was.
Terrible sprinter, dope basketball player. But on to your point, speed and endurance. And then talk to me about, that beautiful cross-section of speed, endurance, because we're talking about this is a spectrum, speed being at this one end, top end of the spectrum, where everybody wants to live. Yeah. And then endurance being at the bottom end of the spectrum, which is where the majority of people, like you say, live their lives walking, jogging, endurance activities. Now talk to us about speed, endurance. This is a really interesting thing.
Sure. Just like strength, though, right? It's the same thing. There's a continuum between heavy weights and moving really, really fastly, or moving something really, really light, really fast. It's important to kind of just surf that entire continuum. It's the same thing with running. Yeah. It's important to do a lot of long, slow walking and hiking and jogging, but it's also really important to actually task yourself, your nervous system, as often as you possibly can, which may be once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. But it's also important to surf that curve, everything that exists within it. So it's not just one or the other.
Yes, there's a blend at which
there's
you
a blend.
Should be aiming for.
Yeah, but you should probably, if I'm talking to the general population, it's, again, these heuristics are very similar to what they are when we're talking to elites, is you should spend most of your time doing fairly slow stuff, and do a lot of that, and then sometimes do stuff that's really, really fast, but only occasionally. And then occasionally do some things in the middle as well. And it's really that simple, It's like every day go for a walk or go for a jog every couple of days. And maybe once a week you run really fast. And then once every other week you just do something that's somewhere in the middle.
So quick question, because I want a nice comparison for the people at home. Let's talk about our elite sprinters. How often are they touching physical speed, i.e. flat out sprinting during a weekly cycle?
It depends on what and how you consider what you consider as flat out sprinting.
Max speed.
Max. So that never. The only time they're actually reaching true maximum speed is when they're racing. And they may race anywhere between 10 times and 50 times a year. And those are the only true times where they're actually reaching maximum speed. If in many programs that are sort of speed-based programs, they'll do speed, so fast stuff, twice a week.
So that could be accelerations?
No, I'm talking about speed, like upright stuff where they reach about, let's say, 98% of their maximum sprint speed. They might do that twice a week. And that's very few programs will do more than twice a week.
Why is that?
Because it's really, really taxing. It's taxing neurologically, but it's also really taxing to your tissues. You just need 3 or 4 days to recover. Some people need 7 or 10 days to recover from that type of intense work. So, acceleration is different. Yeah. You can accelerate every day. Eric was a basketball player. He accelerated hard every single day playing basketball, and that's fine. It's not the type of load that actually running at 98% of your maximum speed is on the entirety of the system.
So if you're a person who is, let's say, undertrained, i.e. is not a professional athlete, you turn up at a class, let's say, like Barry's boot camp, where running is a humongous element of what you're doing, and you're being told to push yourself to, let's say, 14 miles per hour on the treadmill, and you're going back to that class, and that, to you, actually represents maybe 90% of your max speed, and you're going back and you're doing that 5-6 days a week. What are you asking for in terms of, your body?
Problems. You're asking for problems.
What are the biggest problems?
It's very simply, there's a relationship between the load that you put your system through and how you adapt to that load. The higher the magnitude of that load, the more recovery you need before you do it again. And if you want to elicit some sort of adaptation from a low load or a low magnitude thing, you need to do it very frequently. So there's a relationship between the magnitude of something and the frequency. The lower the magnitude of that load, walking, for example, you can walk every single day. Stretching, if you're trying to get more flexible, how do we do that? We stretch, right? Now, is the load of stretching of high magnitude or low magnitude? It's really low. So we have to do it really, really frequently to get more flexible. If you're trying to get faster, or if you're trying to get your maximum strength up, let's say you want to move your back squat from 60 kilos to 80 kilos, and you're going to be doing, your maximum back squat of 2 RM or 3 RM, and you do three or 4 or 5 sets of that, that's a lot of load. The magnitude there is really high. So how frequently are we going to do that? Not very.
Yep.
We might do that every 2 days or 3 days or 4 days or even 5 days. So there's a relationship between the magnitude and the frequency of something. So doing something that is high magnitude, like what you're saying at Barry's boot camp. Yeah, that's high magnitude. The frequency then should be really, not frequent.
Yeah.
That's something you do like once a week or once every 4 days.
The interesting thing that I'm actually finding with general population is that there's almost like a disconnect between load and volume. So high magnitude could be high speed, it could be high load, but also it could be high volume.
Absolutely.
As well. And so one of the things that conversations that I'm trying to have with women is the idea that a methodology like Pilates really encourages high volume training and therefore increases, lots more like damage to the muscles, and therefore requires, and we don't necessarily treat it because we think of it as low impact, low load, but it's actually high volume. And what I'm seeing is people overtraining in this methodology because they're confusing it with being low impact and low load. Does that make sense?
Yeah, really good point.
Whereas I feel like we should be actually treating that as if it's a big sprint session, a big Barry's Bootcamp session, rather than perhaps participating in that modality 5 days a week.
Right.
If we're thinking about how do we preserve and how do we get a real balance in our programming, that should also be considered.
Yeah, you have to understand what we mean when we talk about load. Load is not just heavy stuff. Intensity is part of it, but volume is also part of it, and density is part of it. So how often you do it, those are the 3 things that make up what load is. So if you're heavy, intensity, and heavy volume, and heavy density, this is only going to end up one way.
Injured.
Yes.
Talking about injuries, what's the most common thing that you see injury-wise amongst elite female performers? Is there something that you can be like, oh, you know what? They are more susceptible to this, or is it less general or less specific? Yeah,
it's not generalizable in my in the sports in which I work with. That's not generalizable. We obviously see in the soccer community, for example, that women are X amount of times more likely to tear their ACL than males. So we see that a lot because I do a lot of work in professional soccer. So you do see that a lot in soccer. You don't see it a lot in running-based sports.
Got you.
Really. You may, with the distance athletes, you may see more bone issues with females than you do in males.
When you say bone, are we talking like...
So more stress fractures and stress reactions and things like that, whether it be, in their shins or in the femurs or even in the hips with some. So we see that typically often in more females, but in the athletes that I work with, I don't see anything. No. It's not generalizable at all.
Now, Stu, I want to talk about the mental and psychological aspects of training elite performers, and in particular, elite females. How do you adopt or adapt, more importantly, your coaching style to suit female needs as opposed to men? Now, we talked about being tactful when we're talking about nutrition, but when it comes to just basic training and hard work, are men and women the same? Do you talk to them the same? Do you have to bring a different temperament to the table? Is it individualistic? Is it gender? Is it race? Is it culture? What is it? Look at Stu. No, he just treats everybody the same.
No, I'm the opposite. I treat everybody differently.
Why is that?
As I said, an individual is not the average of all individuals,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're females or males or a cohort of both.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot go into a relationship with that as our guiding heuristic, where everybody's the same, or males are this way and females are this way. We start with, Louise, I've just met you. I'm going to coach you today. I'm going to learn about you. And I use what I learn about you to inform our communication and how I coach you. And that may be similar to Jane, who I worked with 8 years ago.
Right.
But I don't go in with the assumption that Louise, because you're female, you're the same as Jane.
There's a high level of emotional intelligence, Stu, that you apply to coaching that I don't think I've really ever seen at any level that I've competed at, if you know what I mean, in my kind of coaching setup. I feel like, and that's not to say that I've had bad coaching whatsoever, but there's definitely an element of thoughtfulness that you're bringing to the table when it comes to your individual athletes. What led you to develop that skill? Is it something that you were like, this is a necessity, this is what I wish I had, or this is what the athletes need? What led you down that path to be like, you know what, this isn't just about a physical thing, there's a psychological aspect here that's going to improve this athlete's performance?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my primary coaching mentor is a guy named Coach Dan Paff, who I met in 1994. And I went and visited him on his track at University of Texas, and I watched him coach for 2 weeks. And I watched him coach. I watched him do therapy. I watched him give nutritional advice. I watched him have quote-unquote sports psych conversations on the side of the track for an hour. I watched him go into his office after training and read a bunch of new stuff and studies. I watched him essentially take a very pluralistic view of what I thought was just one way. Just coaching is just standing on the side of a track with a whistle and a stopwatch and looking at some technical things, and that's it. But coaching is so much more than that, isn't it? Coaching is about the integration of all of the things that go into this. So how Dan explained it to me is coaching is like spinning plates. You know, you've got these tall things and you get a plate and you're just basically running from plate to plate, trying to keep them all spinning. And you're also trying to identify what plate is not spinning as fast. And then you have to go over to that plate and, okay, I got to spend some time on this nutrition plate because it's not spinning like the other plates, or that sports psych plate because it's not spinning as fast. It's about recognizing first and foremost all of the things that go into it, and then second, what are the ones that need a little bit more encouragement on. So that was my early days in coaching, right? This was 1994. And then I've seen now somebody who's doing it at the level that I want to be doing it at, and that guided all of my work from then. You know, for the next however many years, 20, 30 years? Dang, 30 years. I'm old. Yeah, 30 years. So it's just, I had a really good mentor. And other coaches have had really good mentors that didn't look at performance and health as pluralistically or as integrated as Dan did, and have been really successful. And you can be really successful in other ways. As you've said, your coaches weren't necessarily that way, but they were still really good coaches, and you've had good coaching. But the way I would look at it, health and performance are interrelated, and they're interrelated with all of these different things as well, including psychology, nutrition, and social aspects, and money and your job, and all of these things that come into it. When we talked the relationship between load and adaptation. I like the word load, but what many people say instead of load is stress. And if you go back to Hans Selye's original research on stress, is the one thing that you can take away from there is stress is all things. You can't just say stress is X. All of the things can come together, and it's cumulative between all of these things, whether it's physical, psychological or mental or social, or all of these different things add to your stress, or what I call load.
Now, Stu, what most people don't know about you, or maybe they do, is that you were a former DJ on the ones and twos. Now, we've got a game. We're going to close out today on the ones and twos. We're going to close out...
Do you know what the ones and twos are?
Yeah, decks. 1, 2, 2 channels. Right? Pretty much. Isn't it?
Most of the decks that most DJs started off with back in the day were called techniques, 1200s.
Yeah.
1200s.
Yeah.
1200s.
Oh, is that why it's the ones and twos? Yeah. There you go. Expert DJ. Now, the game that we're going to play is called Beats Per Minute. I love it. I thought of this today. It was brilliant. Now,
I think this is where everybody just turns off and just goes to the next pod.
It doesn't matter. I'm having great fun. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions. Okay. Because you came really early to our interview. You didn't. You were on time and I was late. But I've got 5 questions for you. And I want you to guess how many beats per minute do these events happen at? This is brilliant.
I'm not going to know.
You're a speed master. You're an expert in speed.
Yeah, but okay.
You're an expert in speed.
Okay.
Who else am I going to ask?
Sure.
Beats per minute. Let's go. How many beats per minute is the average human heart rate?
The average human heart rate would be 82.
Well, we've got a range, and that's not far off. 60 to 100. So if you'd have said 80, I'd have taken it.
But the average definitely isn't 60. It's probably somewhere around 80.
60 and 100.
Yeah, but
I would say the average is 80.
There's a massive range between 60 and 100. So let's just say that I got that one right.
Expert, but not particularly accurate.
1 for 1.
Okay. How many beats per minute does a hummingbird flap its wings?
Oh.
This is really
beats per minute?
Yeah, like what's the beats per minute, the BPM?
I would say the
now, bearing in mind the average human heart rate. Is
I thought give me context here.
Yeah.
So I would say that the average hummingbird beats their wings about 20 times per second. So 20 times 60 is 1,200.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say about 1,500.
Ooh! I might give you... I tell you what, I'm going to give you half a point for the first one. I'm going to give you half a point for this one. Because the range, and I don't know why there's a range, I guess it's kind of hard to calculate, is 720 to 5,400. That's a humongous range. So I
don't like that I'm only getting half a point on both of those, because I was within the range on both. I should get full points.
You're going to get half a point. But my point is, so like 720 to 5,000, that's an endurance hummingbird.
How would I have got a full point?
If you'd have given me
the exact middle
to 5,400.
That's just a terrible game.
Next, question number 3. How many beats per minute is the track Bam Bam by Sister Nancy?
Oh. $98.
Wrong. 166. 0 points. Number 4. You can Google it. I did. How many beats per minute is Usain Bolt's fastest race? So the fastest race he ever ran, his 60 to 80 meters.
Okay.
During that split.
Yeah.
How many beats per minute?
So it's 4.5 steps per second. So 4.5 times 60 is
basically how many steps per minute, effectively, or something like that. Go on.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Don't let me interrupt.
4.5 steps per second. So 4 times 60 is 240. 5 times 60 is 300. So 270.
I'm going to give you a point. It's 264. But the mathematics alone was impressive. All right, I'm going to give you a point for that. It was 264.
I should be on 3 points, right? Or 3 out of 4. I got Sister Nancy wrong.
You're on 2 out of 4.
Because here's the thing. When I was DJing, we didn't have digital equipment that showed us the beats per minute, by the way.
We won't talk about
because I was a real DJ.
Okay. Final question, 5th and final. How many beats per minute is the track Flowers by Miley Cyrus? Now, bearing in mind, Sister Nancy.
I don't know if Flowers is faster or slower. I have no idea.
Well, this is the point.
Is it faster?
What do you think?
I don't know.
You tell me. Have a guess.
I'm going to think it's slower. So let's go with 140.
Ooh, No points. 118. Thank you for joining us on the Slay podcast, Stu. Honestly, you've been an incredible guest.
Thank you for having me.
If ever you want to come on again, I'd love to do this.
Would you?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I'd love to be back.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you for inviting me.
No, you've genuinely given us so much insight. But also, on an athlete to coach level, I want to say thank you. Because I know we've given so many years to the sport as athletes, but coaches, I think, never really get the flowers that they deserve.
I agree.
Years and years of being underpaid, babying, bratty athletes in the pursuit of a gold medal that you don't get to take home.
Yeah.
There's something really honourable about that, Stu.
I do it for
And
the money.
whilst I don't necessarily like your choice in music, I think
Really?
you've got a really big heart.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for coming
Thanks,
on.
Louise.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Stu, tell us what you're up to right now and where people can find you, your resources. Give us your deets.
I do two things. I coach elite athletes and I coach coaches. I do both of them through a vehicle that I own called Altis. You can reach Altis at altis.world or on Instagram at Altis, Facebook at Altis, Twitter, X, Altis, so on and so forth. I primarily, in my socials, I'm on Instagram at Fingermash. That was my DJ name. Finger Mash. Finger Mash.
Love that. Thank you for joining us, Stu.
Thank you.
That concludes this episode of Slay. Stay tuned for more empowering discussions on female health, fitness, and life. You can follow me at Louise Hazel on social media, and you can follow Stu at Finger Mash. That's Finger Mash. Check out the Slay brand at Slay Athletic, and don't forget to subscribe to the Slay podcast if you haven't done so already on YouTube, and leave us a comment. You can also get fit at home using the Slay app. Download it now for free from the App Store and join our online community.